The ship was small. That was the first thing Ambassador Vexthal noticed as he watched it drift into Council space. It was barely larger than a transport vessel, painted in colors of blue and white, with strange symbols on its hull that the translation systems struggled to read. "Another young species," said Counselor Mirtha, her 4 arms folded across her chest in a gesture of boredom. "How many does this make this cycle?" 17, Vexthal replied without looking away from the viewing screen. Though most do not survive their first decade in Council space. This was true. The galaxy was old, and the Council of 12,000 worlds had seen countless species rise and fall. Some were absorbed into larger empires. Some destroyed themselves with weapons they did not understand. Others simply faded away, unable to compete with civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. The newcomers called themselves humans. They came from a small yellow star in an unremarkable arm of the galaxy. Their world was called Earth, a name that meant nothing to anyone in the Council. They had been traveling through space for only 500 years, which was barely a heartbeat in galactic terms. Vexthal felt a mild curiosity, nothing more. He had served as ambassador for the Aelori Dominion for 300 years. He had seen species come and go like waves on a shore. These humans would be no different. The small ship requested permission to dock at the Grand Station, the massive structure that served as the Council's seat of power. Permission was granted almost immediately. The Council was always eager to meet new species. New species meant new resources, new technologies to study, and new populations to bring under Council influence. Vexthal made his way to the docking bay along with several dozen other ambassadors and officials. It was customary to greet new species with a show of diversity. The Council wanted newcomers to see how many different forms of life could work together in peace. It was impressive. It was also meant to be intimidating. The docking bay was enormous, large enough to hold 1,000 ships. Today, it held only the small human vessel, which looked even tinier against the vast metal walls. A ramp descended from the ship's side, and Vexthal leaned forward slightly, curious to see what these creatures looked like. The first human stepped out, and Vexthal felt a small wave of disappointment. They were so ordinary. 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head with 2 eyes. They walked upright on flat feet. Their skin was a brownish color, smooth and soft-looking. They wore simple clothing in dark colors. The human was female, according to the translation systems. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that were nearly black. She moved with a confident stride, looking around the docking bay with obvious interest rather than fear. Behind her came 4 more humans, all dressed in similar fashion. They carried no visible weapons, though Vexthal knew that meant nothing. Many species kept their weapons hidden. The female human stopped in front of the gathered ambassadors and smiled. It was a strange expression. She pulled her lips back from her teeth, showing flat white squares arranged in rows. Vexthal had seen many species display their teeth as a threat, but the human's body language suggested friendliness, not aggression. "Greetings," she said, and the translation implants in every listener's brain converted her words into their native languages. "I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for welcoming us to Council space." Her voice was warm and steady. She did not seem nervous at all, despite being surrounded by species that could crush her with a single limb. High Chancellor Yorith stepped forward. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 4 meters tall, with scales of deep purple and eyes that glowed with inner light. He was the current leader of the Council, elected by the 12,000 member worlds to serve for a century. "Welcome, Ambassador Vasquez," Yorith said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The Council of 12,000 worlds greets humanity and offers the hand of friendship." This was standard language, used for every new species. It promised nothing and demanded nothing. It was simply a polite way of saying, "We see you. We acknowledge you. Now let us see if you are worth our time." Ambassador Vasquez bowed her head slightly. "We are honored to be here. Humanity has dreamed of this moment for centuries. We have looked up at the stars since we first gained the ability to think. We always believed we were not alone. Now we know it is true." There was something in her voice that caught Vexthal's attention. Something genuine. Most new species were either terrified or arrogant when they first met the Council. This human seemed to be neither. She seemed happy, truly. deeply happy, as if meeting the galaxy was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. The formal ceremonies continued for several hours. Ambassador Vasquez presented credentials from her government, documents that explained humanity's political structure, their technological capabilities, and their intentions in council space. She answered questions with patience and good humor. She complimented the beauty of the grand station. She asked thoughtful questions about council procedures. Vexthal found himself reluctantly impressed. This human was a skilled diplomat. She said nothing offensive, made no unreasonable demands, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about the galaxy's various species. When the ceremonies finally ended, Ambassador Vasquez was granted provisional membership in the council. This was the lowest tier of membership, given to all new species. It allowed them to trade, travel, and communicate, but gave them no voting rights and no protection under council law. If humanity proved themselves worthy over the next few centuries, they might earn higher status. If not, they would fade away like so many others. The gathered ambassadors began to disperse, returning to their duties. Vexthal was about to leave when he noticed something strange. The archivists had arrived. The archivists were an ancient order, older than the council itself. They served no government and answered to no authority. Their only purpose was to collect and preserve knowledge. They maintained vast libraries on a hidden world, containing the histories of every species that had ever existed in the galaxy. Most archivists stayed in their libraries, rarely venturing into the wider galaxy. To see even one at a diplomatic ceremony was unusual. To see the chief archivist himself was almost unheard of. Chief Archivist Kolveth was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His body was thin and frail, covered in gray scales that had faded with age, but his 7 eyes were sharp and bright, flickering with intelligence that had been accumulating for thousands of years. He approached Ambassador Vasquez slowly, his walking staff clicking against the metal floor. The human woman turned to face him, her expression curious but not alarmed. "Ambassador Vasquez," Kolveth said, his voice thin and reedy, "I wish to ask you a question about your homeworld." "Of course," she replied with another of those strange tooth-showing smiles. "I am happy to share information about Earth." "Your world's coordinates," Kolveth said. "They were listed in your credentials. I wish to confirm them." This was an odd request. The coordinates had already been verified by council systems, but Ambassador Vasquez simply nodded and recited a string of numbers that meant nothing to Vexthal. Kolveth listened carefully. Then he pulled out a small device and entered the numbers. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Vexthal watched the old archivist's face. He had learned to read many species over his long career, and what he saw now troubled him. Kolveth's 7 eyes had gone wide. His thin body had become very still. The scales on his neck had turned a shade paler. These were signs of shock. Deep, profound shock. "Is something wrong?" Ambassador Vasquez asked. Noticing the archivist's reaction, Kolveth did not answer. He looked at the human woman as if seeing her for the first time. His eyes traveled slowly over her form, studying her face, her hands, the way she stood. There was something in his gaze that Vexthal could not identify. It might have been disbelief. It might have been fear. "Archivist Kolveth," Vexthal said, stepping forward. "Is there a problem?" The old archivist seemed to shake himself out of a trance. He looked at Vexthal, then back at the human, then at his device. "No," he said, but his voice was not steady. "No problem. I simply need to verify something in the archives. Please excuse me." He turned and walked away without another word. His pace was faster than it had been when he arrived. His walking staff clicked rapidly against the floor. Ambassador Vasquez watched him go with a puzzled expression. "Did I say something wrong?" "I do not know," Vexthal admitted. "The archivists are strange creatures. They know things that others do not. Sometimes this knowledge troubles them." The human woman nodded slowly. "Well, I hope I did not cause any offense. Humanity truly does come in peace. We have no interest in conquest or conflict. We simply want to learn, to trade, and to make friends." There was that word again, friends. Vexthal had noticed that the humans used it often. It seemed to be important to them. "I am sure the archivist meant no insult," Vexthal said. "Perhaps your world's coordinates reminded him of something from the ancient records. The archivists have information dating back millions of years." Much of it is incomplete or mysterious. Ambassador Vasquez smiled again. That's fascinating. I would love to learn more about these archives someday. Humanity treasures knowledge. It's one of our core values. The conversation continued for a while longer before Ambassador Vasquez was escorted to the quarters that had been prepared for the human delegation. Vexthal returned to his own chambers, but he could not stop thinking about the archivist's reaction. He had known Kolveth for over 2 centuries. In all that time, he had never seen the old scholar show such obvious distress. The archivists dealt with ancient secrets and forgotten histories. They were trained to remain calm no matter what they discovered. What could possibly be in the records about Earth that would shake Kolveth so badly? Vexthal decided it was probably nothing. The archivists were known for overreacting to historical curiosities. Perhaps Earth occupied the same coordinates as some long-dead civilization, and Kolveth was simply surprised by the coincidence. He put the matter out of his mind and focused on his duties. The next few days passed normally. Ambassador Vasquez and her team attended various meetings and social functions. They were polite, friendly, and eager to learn. The humans asked many questions about council procedures, trade agreements, and cultural customs. They shared information about their own world freely. Vexithal learned that Earth was a small planet with a single moon. It had large oceans and varied climates. The humans had evolved there over millions of years, eventually developing intelligence and technology. They had fought many wars among themselves, before finally uniting under a single government. Now they had set out to explore the galaxy. It was a common story. Many species followed similar paths. There was nothing remarkable about humanity's history, and yet, Vexthal could not shake a growing sense of unease. He noticed that other officials seemed to share this feeling. The archivists, in particular, had become unusually active. He saw groups of them hurrying through the corridors of the Grand Station, carrying ancient data crystals and speaking in hushed voices. Chief Archivist Kolveth had not been seen since his strange reaction at the welcoming ceremony. On the 5th day after humanity's arrival, Vexthal received an urgent summons. He was ordered to report to the High Council chamber immediately. The message came with the highest priority seal, indicating a matter of extreme importance. When he arrived at the chamber, he found it already filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. All 12 of the ruling species were represented. High Chancellor Yorith sat at the center of the great table, his glowing eyes troubled, and there, standing before the assembly, was Chief Archivist Kolveth. The old scholar looked terrible. His scales had turned almost white. His 7 eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. He looked like he had not slept since the day of humanity's arrival. "Thank you all for coming," Yorith said, his deep voice heavy with concern. "The Chief Archivist has brought us information that requires our immediate attention. Archivist Kolveth, please proceed." The ancient scholar took a shaky breath. In his hands, he held a data crystal that pulsed with pale light. It was old, very old. Vexthal could see the marks of age on its surface. "Honored counselors," Kolveth began, his voice thin but steady. "I have spent the past 5 days searching the deepest archives. I have accessed records that have not been opened in millions of years. I have found information that was deliberately hidden by our predecessors, sealed away with warnings that were never meant to be ignored." He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled leaders. "The world that humans call Earth has another name. A name given to it long before humanity existed. A name given to it by the first civilization, the ancient beings who seeded life across this galaxy before vanishing into the void." The chamber was absolutely silent. The first civilization was legend. No one knew what had happened to them or where they had gone. Their ruins were scattered across the galaxy, their technology still beyond modern understanding. Kolveth lifted the data crystal. In the language of the ancients, the human homeworld was called Keth-Vul. He spoke the word carefully, as if it caused him physical pain. The translation is not exact, but the closest meaning in modern terms would be the death world, the crucible, the nursery of nightmares. Vexthal felt a chill run through his body. Around him, other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. "I do not understand," said Counselor Mirtha. "What does this mean?" Kolveth lowered his head. When he looked up again, there was something in his eyes that Vexthal had never seen before. It was fear. Pure, raw fear. "It means," the archivist said quietly, "that we have made a terrible mistake. The creatures we have just welcomed to Council Space are not what they appear to be. They are not harmless newcomers. They are not primitive explorers. He held up the data crystal, and it began to project images into the air above the table. Images of a blue and green world. Images of strange creatures. Images of violence and death and survival against impossible odds. The humans are the children of Keth-Vul, Kolveth said. They are the survivors of the most deadly world in the known galaxy. They are the nightmare that the first civilization fled from. And now, honored counselors, they are here, among us, asking to be our friends. The images continued to play, showing scenes that would haunt Vexthal's dreams for the rest of his life. And in that moment, everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity changed forever. The archives of the first civilization were kept in the deepest level of the archivist homeworld. Few living beings had ever seen them. The records were so old that most species had forgotten they existed. Kolveth had spent 5 days without sleep searching through these ancient files. His assistants had begged him to rest, but he could not. Not after what he had discovered when he first checked the coordinates of the human homeworld. The first civilization had been the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. They had existed hundreds of millions of years ago, when most current species were still simple organisms floating in primordial seas. They had mastered technologies that modern science could not begin to understand. They had seeded life on billions of worlds across the galaxy. And then, suddenly, they had vanished. No one knew why. Their cities stood empty. Their ships drifted through space with no one aboard. Their libraries remained, protected by machines that still functioned after countless ages. The archivists had been studying these libraries for millennia. Most of the information was beyond understanding. The first civilization had spoken in concepts that no modern mind could grasp, but some records had been translated. Some secrets had been uncovered. The file on Keth-Vul was one of these secrets. It had been sealed with warnings in 17 different languages, all now extinct. The seals themselves were dangerous to break, protected by security systems that could destroy an entire planet. But Kolveth had the authority and the knowledge to open them. He wished now that he had not. The file was massive, containing millions of years of observations and data. The first civilization had watched the world called Keth-Vul with great attention. They had recorded everything that happened there, from the first simple life forms to the emergence of the creatures now called humans. Kolveth had read only a small portion of the file. It was enough. The first civilization had not simply seeded life on Keth-Vul. They had designed the planet as an experiment. They wanted to see what would happen if life was forced to evolve under the most extreme possible conditions. The planet's axis was tilted at a severe angle, causing dramatic seasonal changes. Some regions froze solid, while others burned under intense radiation. The climate shifted constantly, unpredictably. Ice ages came and went. Deserts became oceans. Forests became wastelands. The planet's geology was equally violent. The surface was broken into massive plates that moved and collided, creating earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis. Mountains rose and fell. Continents drifted across the globe. No landscape remained stable for long. The atmosphere itself was dangerous. It contained a highly reactive gas called oxygen, which caused metal to rust and organic matter to burn. The planet's magnetic field was unstable, allowing harmful radiation from its star to reach the surface. The star itself was variable, going through cycles of increased and decreased output. Any one of these factors would have made most worlds uninhabitable. Keth-Vul had all of them at once, and yet, life had thrived there. Not simply survived, but thrived with a violence and intensity that the first civilization had never seen before. The file contained detailed records of the creatures that evolved on Keth-Vul. Kolveth had forced himself to read through them, growing more horrified with each page. There were creatures that had evolved to produce electricity and used it to stun their prey. There were creatures covered in armor that could deflect almost any attack. There were creatures that could regenerate lost limbs, creatures that could survive being frozen solid, creatures that could go without water for years. There were parasites that took control of their hosts' minds, forcing them to behave in ways that helped the parasite spread. There were viruses that could mutate so quickly that no immune system could keep up with them. There were bacteria that could eat rock, metal, even radioactive waste. Every creature on Keth-Vul was engaged in a constant war for survival. Prey animals evolved speed, camouflage, toxins, and armor. Predators evolved greater strength, sharper senses, more sophisticated hunting strategies. The competition never stopped. The arms race never ended. The first civilization had watched this biological warfare with fascination and growing concern. They had seeded many worlds with life, but none had produced such aggressive, adaptable organisms. Kethvul was different. Kethvul was special. Kethvul was dangerous. The file included observations about many specific creatures. Kolveth had made notes on the ones that disturbed him most. There were ocean predators called sharks that had existed in essentially the same form for over 400 million years. They were so perfectly designed for killing that evolution had found no way to improve them. They could sense the electrical fields of living creatures from great distances. They could smell a single drop of blood in vast amounts of water. They went into a feeding frenzy when they detected prey, attacking anything that moved. There were reptiles called crocodiles that had survived multiple extinction events. They could go for months without eating, then consume prey larger than themselves in a single meal. They killed by grabbing their victims and spinning rapidly, tearing off chunks of flesh in a technique called the death roll. There were insects called army ants that moved in colonies of millions. They stripped everything in their path, consuming any organic matter they encountered. Other creatures fled before them or were devoured. Even the largest predators avoided them. There were plants that ate animals, trapping them in sticky fluids or snapping closed like jaws. There were fungi that could control the behavior of insects, forcing them to climb to high places before dying and releasing spores. There were jellyfish whose venom could stop a heart in minutes. And then, there were the humans. The first civilization had observed the emergence of humans with particular interest. These creatures were not the strongest or the fastest on their world. They were not the largest or the most venomous. In many ways, they seemed like unlikely candidates for dominance. But the humans had something that other creatures lacked. They had minds that could plan, imagine, and create. They could make tools and weapons. They could communicate complex ideas. They could work together in large groups, coordinating their actions toward common goals. Most importantly, they could adapt to almost anything. The file documented human survival strategies that seemed impossible. They could pursue prey over vast distances, simply following until the animal collapsed from exhaustion and heat. They called this persistence hunting. No other predator on any known world used this technique. It required a level of endurance that was almost supernatural. They could survive in almost any environment. They lived in frozen tundra, burning deserts, dense jungles, and open grasslands. They survived floods, droughts, fires, and plagues. When disasters killed large portions of their population, the survivors simply rebuilt and continued. They domesticated other species, bending them to their will. They took wolves, one of the most successful predators on their world, and transformed them into loyal companions. They took large grazing animals and made them into food sources and labor. They controlled crops, growing them in organized patterns instead of hunting and gathering. They developed medicine. When diseases struck, they did not simply accept death. They studied the diseases, learned how they worked, and created countermeasures. They cut open living bodies and repaired damaged organs. They created poisons that killed harmful organisms inside their bodies, while leaving the body itself alive. They harnessed the power of their violent planet. They captured lightning and made it flow through wires. They dug deep into the earth for metals and fuels. They split the very atoms of matter, releasing energy on a scale that rivaled stars. The first civilization had watched all of this with mounting alarm. They had created Kethvul as an experiment to see what extreme conditions would produce. They had not expected this. They had not expected a species that could conquer their own death world and begin looking outward. The final entries in the file were written in a tone that Kolveth recognized as urgency. Even through the ancient language, the dominant species of Kethvul has begun observing the night sky with optical instruments. They are mapping the stars. They are theorizing about the nature of the universe. They are beginning to understand that other worlds exist. The dominant species has launched artificial objects into orbit around their planet. They are testing the boundaries of their world, preparing to move beyond it. The dominant species has sent members of their kind beyond the atmosphere of their planet. They have walked on their moon. They are already planning expeditions to nearby worlds. The final entry was dated shortly before the first civilization's disappearance. It was written in a format that suggested an official proclamation, something meant to be preserved for future generations. This record is being sealed. All information regarding Kethvul is classified at the highest level. All observation of the planet is to cease immediately. All contact is forbidden. The experiment has produced results beyond our worst projections. The dominant species of Kethvul represents a threat to galactic civilization that cannot be adequately expressed in words. They are the ultimate product of the most hostile environment we have ever created. They are persistence predators with advanced intelligence and unlimited adaptability. We have decided to withdraw from this region of space. We will leave no trace of our presence that the Kethvul species might detect. We will seal these records so that future civilizations might be warned. If you are reading this, it means the Kethvul species has survived and expanded into space. We do not know what they will become or what they will want. We only know what they are. The children of a death world, forged in endless struggle, unstoppable in their determination to survive. We are leaving. We recommend you do the same. Do not make contact. Do not attempt communication. Do not reveal yourself to them. Pray they never find you. The file ended there. Kolveth had sat in the dark archives for a long time after finishing his initial review. His mind struggled to process what he had read. The implications were too vast, too terrible to fully comprehend. The humans were not simply another young species finding their way into the galaxy. They were the nightmare that had driven the most powerful civilization in history to flee. They were the product of millions of years of violent evolution, honed into the most adaptable, most determined, most dangerous creatures in existence, and the Council had just welcomed them with open arms. Kolveth had immediately begun gathering more evidence. He needed to present his findings to the Council in a way they would understand. The ancient records were compelling, but they were also abstract. The Council members were practical beings. They needed to see concrete proof. He found this proof in the cultural materials that humans had provided as part of their diplomatic package. They had shared vast amounts of information about themselves, apparently seeing no reason to hide anything. They had included historical records, scientific data, and entertainment media. It was the entertainment media that proved most useful. The humans had something called nature documentaries. These were recordings of life on Earth, presented for educational and entertainment purposes. They showed Earth's creatures in their natural habitats, hunting, fighting, surviving. Kolveth watched these documentaries with horror. The ancient records had been clinical, detached observations. The documentaries were vivid and immediate, showing the reality of life on a death world in brutal detail. He saw predators tearing prey apart while it was still alive. He saw parasites bursting from the bodies of their hosts. He saw venomous creatures injecting toxins that caused agonizing death. He saw the constant, endless competition for survival that defined existence on Earth. And he saw humans treating all of this as normal. The narrators of these documentaries spoke in calm, pleasant voices, as if describing a garden rather than a war zone. The audiences apparently found this content entertaining. Children watched these programs. This, more than anything else, convinced Kolveth of the danger. The humans did not see their world as horrifying. They saw it as home. The violence and death that would traumatize any other species was simply background noise to them. He also studied human history. This was perhaps even more disturbing than their biology. Humans had spent most of their existence fighting each other. They had developed increasingly sophisticated weapons, from sharp rocks to nuclear bombs. They had created and destroyed empires. They had committed atrocities that defied comprehension. They had nearly wiped themselves out on multiple occasions, and yet they had survived. Every disaster, every catastrophe, every self-inflicted wound had only made them stronger and more determined. They came back from the edge of extinction again and again, learning from their mistakes, adapting, growing. They were persistence predators in every sense. They never stopped. They never gave up. They simply kept coming, no matter what was thrown at them. Kolveth had prepared his presentation carefully. He selected the most compelling evidence, the clearest examples, the most undeniable proof. He organized his findings into a form that the Council could understand and believe, and now he stood before them, watching their faces as the reality sank in. The images he projected showed Earth in all its terrible glory. They showed the creatures that lived there, the violence they inflicted on each other, the endless cycle of death and survival that had shaped every organism on the planet. They showed humans as they truly were, the apex predators of the most dangerous world in the galaxy. High Chancellor Yorith was the first to speak after a long silence. His deep voice was troubled, uncertain in a way that Kolveth had never heard before. Archivist, are you certain of these findings? The implications are. He trailed off, unable to find adequate words. I am certain, Kolveth replied. The coordinates match exactly. The descriptions in the ancient records align perfectly with what we know of Earth. There is no mistake. The human homeworld is Kethvul. Counselor Vexthal leaned forward. But the humans seem so harmless. They smile. They speak of peace and friendship. They have shown no aggression since their arrival. That is precisely what makes them so dangerous, Kolveth said. They have learned to mask their nature. They have developed social behaviors that allow them to cooperate, to form alliances, to present a friendly face to potential threats, while assessing their weaknesses. He pulled up another image, showing a human smiling widely. This expression, which they call a smile, involves displaying their teeth. In most species, showing teeth is a threat. Humans have transformed it into a greeting. They have taken a gesture of aggression and made it appear welcoming. The council members shifted uncomfortably. They do the same thing with their other predatory features. Kolveth continued. Their forward-facing eyes, optimal for tracking prey, are described in their own literature as beautiful. Their grasping hands, perfect for wielding weapons, are used for gentle gestures of affection. Their persistence, their refusal to give up, is praised as determination, rather than recognized as the trait of a pursuit predator. He paused, letting his words sink in. The humans have not hidden their nature. They have simply reframed it in positive terms. They see themselves as heroes, survivors, explorers. They do not recognize the horror of their own existence because they have never known anything else. High Chancellor Yorith rose from his seat. His massive form cast a shadow across the chamber. What do you recommend we do, Archivist? Kolveth had thought about this question constantly over the past 5 days. He had considered every option, weighed every possible outcome. The answer he had reached gave him no comfort. I do not know, he admitted. The first civilization, with all their power, chose to flee rather than confront this threat. We do not have their power. We cannot flee. The humans are already here. The chamber fell silent again. The weight of the situation pressed down on everyone present. The children of Kethvul had arrived, and no one knew what would happen next. The council chamber had been converted into something like a theater. The great table where the 12 ruling species normally debated policy had been pushed aside. In its place, a massive viewing screen dominated the room. High Chancellor Yorith had ordered a full review of human cultural materials. Every ambassador, every scientist, every military advisor who could be trusted with classified information had been summoned. They filled the chamber, standing in clusters by species, all facing the screen with expressions of tense anticipation. Archivist Kolveth stood at the control console. His assistants had compiled the most relevant materials from the human databases. They had organized them into categories: biology, history, society, technology. Each category promised new horrors. We will begin with basic biology, Kolveth announced. His voice echoed in the silent chamber. I want everyone to understand what kind of creatures we are dealing with before we examine their civilization. The screen flickered to life, showing a diagram of a human body. Kolveth pointed to various features as he spoke. Humans are bilateral organisms with internal skeletons. They walk upright on 2 legs, leaving their forward limbs free for manipulation. Their eyes face forward, providing excellent depth perception for tracking moving targets. Their ears can detect a wide range of sounds, and they have sensitive skin that can feel temperature, pressure, and pain. So far, nothing seemed unusual. Many species shared these basic characteristics. However, Kolveth continued, there are several features that set humans apart from any other known intelligent species. He zoomed in on the human mouth. Their teeth are a combination of cutting incisors, tearing canines, and grinding molars. This dental structure allows them to eat virtually anything organic. They are true omnivores, capable of surviving on plants, meat, fungi, or any combination thereof. There is almost no organic substance on their planet that some humans have not learned to consume. The next image showed a human in motion, running across an open landscape. Their bodies are designed for sustained activity over long periods. They have an extremely efficient cooling system based on sweating, which allows them to remain active when other animals would collapse from heat buildup. They can travel vast distances on foot, walking or running for entire days without stopping. A video began to play. It showed a group of humans pursuing a large four-legged animal across a dry savanna. The animal was faster than the humans, easily outpacing them in short bursts. But the humans did not stop. They kept following, tracking, walking and jogging for hours under a blazing sun. Eventually, the animal collapsed. It lay on the ground, chest heaving, too exhausted and overheated to move. The humans caught up to it and killed it with simple weapons. This is called persistence hunting, Kolveth explained. Humans do not need to be faster than their prey. They do not need to be stronger. They simply need to keep following until the prey cannot run anymore. They will walk their prey to death. Murmurs rippled through the assembled observers. The concept was disturbing in its simplicity. Most predators relied on speed, strength, or ambush. The idea of a predator that simply refused to stop, that would follow for hours or days until its prey collapsed from exhaustion, was deeply unsettling. There is more, Kolveth said. Watch carefully. The screen showed another video, this time of humans engaged in activities they apparently did for entertainment. Humans running for dozens of kilometers in organized races. Humans lifting enormous weights. Humans swimming across vast distances of open ocean. Humans climbing frozen mountains. Humans fighting each other with their bare hands in structured competitions. Humans regularly push their bodies to the point of failure for recreation, Kolveth noted. They call this sport. They celebrate individuals who can endure the most punishment. This is not viewed as unusual or disturbing in their culture. It is considered admirable. The video changed again, showing something even more alarming. A human lying on a table while other humans cut into their body with metal instruments. This is human medicine, Kolveth said. When a human is injured or diseased, other humans will cut them open and repair the damage directly. They remove diseased organs and replace them with healthy ones taken from other humans. They implant mechanical devices to assist failing hearts. They reconnect severed nerves and blood vessels with tiny stitches. Several observers made sounds of disgust. The idea of opening a living body and manipulating its internal organs was deeply disturbing to most species. It gets worse, Kolveth said. When humans develop cancerous growths, they do not simply accept death. They fight back using methods that would kill any other species. The screen showed images of humans undergoing treatment. Hairless patients lying in hospital beds, connected to machines that pumped toxic chemicals into their blood. They inject themselves with poisons designed to kill rapidly dividing cells. The poisons kill the cancer, but they also damage the patient's own body. Humans endure nausea, weakness, hair loss, and organ damage. Many die from the treatment itself. Those who survive are considered victorious. Another image showed humans lying under large machines that emitted invisible radiation. They also expose themselves to radiation. The same radiation that causes cancer can be used to destroy it, if applied carefully. Humans deliberately burn their own bodies with radiation to kill tumors. Then they heal and continue living. Counselor Mirtha spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. They poison and burn themselves, and they survive? Many do, Kolveth confirmed. Their bodies have remarkable healing abilities. Broken bones will mend. Damaged tissue will regenerate. Their immune systems can learn to recognize and destroy invaders that they have never encountered before. Humans have eradicated diseases that once killed millions of their kind, simply by studying them and developing countermeasures. He paused, letting this information sink in. Now let us examine the creatures that humans share their world with. The next series of videos came from the nature documentaries that humans watched for entertainment. The images were accompanied by calm narration in human languages, translated by the viewing system. A shark appeared on screen, its streamlined body cutting through blue water. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of triangular teeth. This is a shark. There are many species, but all share certain characteristics. They have been essentially unchanged for over 400 million years, because evolution has found no way to improve their design. They can detect blood in water from great distances. They can sense the electrical fields generated by living creatures. When they bite, their teeth can cut through bone. The shark attacked something off-screen, and the water turned red. Sharks occasionally attack humans. When this happens, The human response is not to avoid the ocean. Instead, humans enter the water deliberately to study sharks. Some humans swim with sharks for recreation. Others capture sharks, attach tracking devices, and release them. Humans do not fear these creatures. They are fascinated by them. The screen changed to show a massive reptile lying on a riverbank. Its scales were dark green, and its eyes watched the camera with cold intelligence. This is a crocodile. Like sharks, crocodiles have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years. They are ambush predators, waiting beneath the water until prey approaches, then exploding upward with incredible speed. Their bite force is the strongest of any animal on Earth. A video played showing a crocodile attacking a large animal that had come to drink at a river. The crocodile grabbed its prey and began spinning rapidly, tearing chunks of flesh free in a spray of blood. This is called the death roll. Crocodiles cannot chew, so they tear their prey apart by spinning. The forces involved are extreme. Prey animals are often ripped into pieces while still alive. Several observers turned away from the screen. Others watched with horrified fascination. Humans live alongside these creatures, Kolveth continued. In some regions, crocodiles regularly attack and kill humans. The human response is not to abandon these areas. Instead, they develop strategies for coexisting with the predators. Some humans even wrestle crocodiles for entertainment. The next images showed smaller creatures, but no less disturbing. A spider the size of a human hand crouched on a branch. Its multiple eyes gleamed in the light. Many creatures on Earth produce venom. This spider can kill a human with a single bite. The venom attacks the nervous system, causing paralysis and eventual death. Humans have developed antivenoms for many of these creatures, but not all. Despite this, humans live in areas populated by venomous animals and accept the risk as normal. The screen showed a colorful frog sitting on a leaf. This small creature produces toxins through its skin. A single frog contains enough poison to kill 10 adult humans. The indigenous humans of its region use this poison on hunting darts. They have learned to weaponize the creatures of their world. Image after image followed. Venomous snakes that could kill within hours. Jellyfish with tentacles that caused agonizing pain and heart failure. Plants that produced chemicals to deter being eaten, which humans deliberately consumed for their effects on the mind. Then came the truly disturbing portion of the presentation. Now, Kolveth said, we will examine the relationship between humans and their parasites. The screen showed microscopic organisms swimming through blood. Humans host countless parasites, both inside and outside their bodies. Bacteria live in their digestive systems by the trillions. Mites live on their skin and in their hair. Viruses invade their cells and use them to reproduce. A diagram appeared showing a worm-like creature coiled inside a human body. Some parasites grow to considerable size inside human hosts. This tapeworm can reach lengths of several meters. It lives in the human digestive system, stealing nutrients from its host. Humans can carry these parasites for years without knowing. Another image showed insects feeding on human blood. Mosquitoes drink human blood and transmit diseases in the process. Malaria, a disease caused by parasites spread by mosquitoes, has killed more humans than any war in their history. Billions of humans have died from this single disease. Counselor Yithral of the Mendari Collective raised a trembling limb. How is this species still alive? How has it not been wiped out by disease? An excellent question, Kolveth replied. The answer is adaptation. Human immune systems are remarkably sophisticated. They can learn to recognize and destroy pathogens that they have never encountered before. They develop antibodies, specialized proteins that target specific invaders. Their immune systems have been in a constant arms race with parasites for millions of years. He pulled up another series of images. More importantly, humans have developed cultural adaptations to deal with disease. They wash their bodies and their living spaces to remove pathogens. They cook their food, using heat to kill harmful organisms. They quarantine sick individuals to prevent spread. They have developed an entire field of science dedicated to understanding and fighting disease. The screen showed humans in protective equipment, working with dangerous samples in sealed laboratories. They deliberately study the most deadly diseases known to exist. They keep samples of viruses that could wipe out millions. They do this so they can understand how these diseases work and develop ways to defeat them. Humans do not run from danger. They study it, learn from it, and find ways to overcome it. The presentation continued for hours. The observers learned about human history, the endless wars and conflicts that had shaped their civilization. They saw images of human weapons, from simple clubs to nuclear bombs. They learned about human social structures, the complex hierarchies and alliances that allowed billions of individuals to work together. They learned about human psychology, the way humans formed emotional bonds with each other and with other species, the way they adopted predators as companions, sleeping in the same rooms as creatures that could easily kill them, the way they explored dangerous places simply because they were curious, the way they created art and music and stories, even in the midst of suffering. By the time the presentation ended, the chamber was silent. The observers sat or stood in stunned groups, struggling to process what they had seen. High Chancellor Yorith finally spoke. His voice was heavy with the weight of what he had learned. I have ruled the Council for 70 years. I have seen wars, plagues, natural disasters, and the rise and fall of civilizations. I have never been truly afraid. He paused, his glowing eyes fixed on the now dark screen. I am afraid now. Ambassador Vexthal moved to stand beside the Chancellor. What do we do? The humans are already here. They have been given provisional membership. They expect us to welcome them as equals. They are not our equals, said General Krixal, the Supreme Commander of Council Military Forces. They are predators from a death world. We should treat them as the threat they are. And how do you propose to do that? Kolveth asked quietly. You saw their history. They have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and weapons that can destroy cities. They have fought each other for millennia and emerged stronger from every conflict. Do you believe we can threaten them into submission? The general had no answer. There is something else to consider, Councillor Murtha said slowly. The humans do not know how we see them. To them, this is a normal first contact situation. They expect friendship and cooperation. If we suddenly turn hostile, they will wonder why. And if they wonder why, Vexthal added, they might start studying us the way they study sharks and crocodiles. They might decide that we are a threat to be eliminated. The thought hung in the air, terrible and unavoidable. The humans had come in peace. They wanted friends. But if they learned that the galaxy feared them, that ancient civilizations had fled rather than face them, how would they react? Would they accept being outcasts? Or would they do what they had always done, what their entire evolution had prepared them to do? Would they fight? High Chancellor Yorith made a decision. It was perhaps the most important decision he had ever made. We tell no one, he said. This information is classified at the highest level. The general population must not know the truth about humans. If they learn, panic will spread. Wars might begin. We cannot risk that. What about the humans themselves? Vexthal asked. What do we tell them? We tell them nothing. We continue treating them as normal newcomers. We observe them carefully. We learn everything we can about their capabilities and intentions. And we pray that they truly do come in peace. The Chancellor looked around the chamber at the gathered leaders of the galaxy. Because if they do not, he said quietly, we may already be doomed. The meeting ended. The observers dispersed, carrying the terrible knowledge with them. In the days that followed, they would try to act normal around the human delegation. They would smile and make small talk and pretend that everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. The children of Kethvuel had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The secret lasted exactly 12 days. On the 13th day after the emergency council session, an anonymous data package appeared on the public networks. It contained everything. The ancient records, the translations of the first civilization's warnings, the analysis of human biology and history, even recordings from the council meeting itself. No one knew who leaked the information. The investigation would continue for years without finding an answer. Perhaps it was an official who believed the public had a right to know. Perhaps it was a frightened clerk who wanted to warn their family. Perhaps it was someone who simply wanted to watch the galaxy burn. The reason did not matter. What mattered was the result. Within hours, the information spread to every corner of civilized space. News networks broadcast the horrifying details to billions of viewers. Social media platforms overloaded as terrified citizens shared the revelations with friends and family. Governments scrambled to respond to a crisis they had not anticipated. Panic spread like fire through dry grass. On Korvath Prime, the busiest trading hub in the sector, markets crashed overnight. Merchants who had been negotiating deals with human companies suddenly refused to answer communications. Ships that had been scheduled to carry goods to Earth changed course without explanation. The economy of an entire region went into free fall. On Mindari Station, a popular vacation destination, tourists fled in terror when they learned that humans might visit. Hotels emptied. Restaurants closed. The station that had been filled with laughter and music became a ghost town in less than a day. On the military outpost of Krixvar, generals who had spent their careers preparing for conventional warfare now faced an enemy they did not understand. They repositioned fleets, reinforced defensive positions, and drew up battle plans that they knew were probably useless. How did you fight a species that could walk its prey to death? How did you defeat creatures that poisoned themselves for medicine? Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly found common ground in their shared terror. The Aelori Dominion and the Yithral Hegemony, who had fought 3 wars in the past century, signed a mutual defense treaty. The Korvathi Trade Alliance, which had always remained neutral in political conflicts, began funding military research. Old grudges were forgotten. Old alliances were strengthened. The galaxy was uniting, but not in the way anyone had hoped. And through all of this, the humans remained utterly oblivious. Ambassador Elena Vasquez noticed that something had changed. She was not foolish. She saw the way diplomats avoided her eyes. She heard the silences that fell when she entered rooms. She observed the increased security presence wherever she went, but she did not understand why. She requested meetings with council officials to discuss the sudden coolness in relations. Her requests were politely declined. She sent messages asking if humanity had done something to cause offense. Her messages went unanswered. She tried to engage other diplomats in casual conversation. They made excuses and hurried away. After 2 weeks of this treatment, she filed a formal complaint with the council's diplomatic office. The complaint was acknowledged but not addressed. She felt like she was shouting into a void. Meanwhile, her staff reported similar experiences. Human scientists who had been invited to collaborate with galactic researchers found their invitations withdrawn. Human traders who had been negotiating business deals watched their partners disappear. Human tourists who visited alien worlds were met with stares, whispers, and obvious fear. A human engineer named David Chen had perhaps the most confusing experience. He had been hired to help repair a power plant on a Mindari colony world. When he arrived for his first day of work, he found the facility abandoned. His co-workers had all called in sick. The plant manager had resigned overnight. He stood alone in an empty building, wondering what he had done wrong. He eventually figured out how to do his job without help. He fixed the plant by himself, working double shifts for 3 weeks. When he left, the Mindari government sent him a bonus payment of twice his agreed salary. The message that accompanied the payment thanked him for his service and requested that he never return. David Chen went home confused but richer. He never did learn why everyone had been so afraid of him. Similar stories accumulated across the galaxy. Humans who tried to make friends found themselves isolated. Humans who tried to help found themselves avoided. Humans who asked questions found themselves met with nervous silence. The most dramatic incident occurred on Korvath Station 6, a large orbital platform that served as a waypoint for travelers. A human family was visiting, parents with 2 young children, part of a tourist group exploring the galaxy. When the family walked through the station's public areas, other travelers literally fled from their path. Vendors closed their stalls. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Security officers followed the family at a distance, weapons drawn but not aimed, clearly terrified but trying to maintain order. The human parents were completely bewildered. Their children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5, did not understand why no one wanted to play with them. The little girl started crying because a group of alien children had screamed and run away when she waved at them. The family cut their vacation short and returned to Earth. In their travel review, they mentioned that the galaxy seemed unfriendly and suggested that other human tourists might want to wait a few years before visiting. They never knew that their presence had triggered a security alert that almost resulted in the station being evacuated. The fear of humans manifested in different ways depending on the species and culture. The Aelori, who prided themselves on rationality and scientific thinking, approached the human threat analytically. They studied every piece of information available, created detailed profiles of human capabilities, and developed contingency plans for various scenarios. Their military conducted war games, simulating human attacks. Their scientists worked on countermeasures for human persistence hunting. Their psychologists studied human social patterns, looking for weaknesses to exploit. The Yithral, a deeply spiritual species, interpreted the humans through their religious traditions. Many Yithral believed that humans were a punishment sent by the gods, temples filled with worshippers praying for protection. Religious leaders preached that the galaxy must atone for its sins to avoid the wrath of the Death World children. The Korvathi, practical merchants who cared primarily about profit, calculated the economic impact of the human arrival. They determined that trade with humans could be enormously profitable. But the risks were too great. They implemented policies restricting human commerce, arguing that it was better to lose potential gains than to invite disaster. And the common people of 1,000 worlds simply lived in fear. They shared horror stories about humans. They spread rumors and exaggerations. They created art depicting humans as monsters. They taught their children to hide if they ever saw a human. Human media became a particular focus of terror. The nature documentaries that archivist Kolveth had shown to the Council spread across the galaxy, watched by billions who wanted to understand the threat. These documentaries were not horror films. They were educational programs that humans showed to their children. But to alien viewers, they were more terrifying than any nightmare. The scene of the Persistence hunt became especially infamous. Aliens watched humans pursue their prey across kilometers of landscape, never stopping, never tiring, while the animal they chased slowly weakened and died. The calm narration explaining this hunting technique made it even worse. Humans were not ashamed of what they did. They thought it was fascinating. Other human media spread as well. Action movies showing humans fighting against impossible odds. Medical dramas depicting surgeries and treatments. Historical documentaries about human wars, all of it confirmed the galaxy's worst fears. Humans were exactly as dangerous as the ancient records had warned. The breaking point came 6 weeks after the information leak. On a Korvathi industrial station in the outer regions, a human tourist named Michael Torres was visiting the station as part of an educational tour. He was a teacher from a city called Chicago, taking a sabbatical year to explore the galaxy. He was friendly and curious, asking questions about everything he saw, taking photographs, writing notes for the book he planned to write when he returned home. The station's residents avoided him like he was a plague carrier. They answered his questions with short, nervous replies. They moved to the other side of corridors when he approached, but they did not ask him to leave, and he did not seem to notice their fear. On the 3rd day of his visit, the station's primary reactor developed a critical malfunction. Warning alarms screamed through the corridors. Automated systems began emergency shutdown procedures. Radiation levels in the reactor section spiked to lethal levels, and there were workers trapped inside. 3 Korvathi engineers had been performing routine maintenance when the malfunction occurred. They were now stuck behind sealed doors, separated from safety by a corridor flooded with radiation. The station's systems indicated that rescue teams would need at least an hour to reach them with proper equipment. The engineers did not have an hour. They had perhaps 15 minutes before the radiation killed them. The station's population watched the tragedy unfold on their information screens. There was nothing they could do. The radiation levels were too high for any rescue attempt. The engineers were going to die, and everyone would have to watch it happen. Michael Torres was watching too. He saw the radiation readings, saw the trapped workers on the internal cameras, saw the rescue teams desperately trying to find a faster solution. He asked a nearby Korvathi official how long the engineers could survive the radiation. The official, too frightened of the human to refuse to answer, told him the truth. 15 minutes, maybe less. Michael Torres nodded. Then he started walking toward the reactor section. The Korvathi around him froze in shock. "What are you doing?" the official demanded. "Those people need help," Torres said simply. "Someone has to get them out. The radiation will kill you." Torres looked at the readings on a nearby display. "I've seen worse on Earth," he said. "Spent a summer working cleanup at a nuclear power plant incident. The dosage I'll take going in and out won't kill me instantly. Might give me cancer in 30 years, but I can deal with that." He entered the corridor before anyone could stop him. The station's population watched in horrified amazement as the human ran through radiation levels that would have killed any of them in minutes. They saw him reach the sealed door, override the emergency locks with a technique he seemed to know by instinct, and pull the 3 unconscious engineers to safety one by one. He took 3 trips through a corridor saturated with radiation that glowed on the sensors like fire. Each trip should have killed him. Each trip left him more exposed, more damaged, more doomed. When he finally staggered out with the last engineer, the rescue teams had arrived. They rushed the Corvathi workers to medical care. They tried to rush Torres too, but he waved them off. "I'm fine," he said. His skin was red, like he had spent too long in the sun. He seemed tired but otherwise undamaged. "Just a little sunburn. I'll sleep it off." The medical scans told a different story. He had absorbed a radiation dose that would have killed most species twice over. His cells were damaged. His DNA was scrambled. He should have been dying on his feet. Instead, he asked if there was a good restaurant on the station. He was hungry from all the running. The Corvathi government held an emergency session that night. They debated for hours before reaching a decision that shocked the galaxy. They surrendered. The formal document was transmitted to Earth the following morning. It offered unconditional surrender to humanity, ceding all Corvathi territory, resources, and populations to human control. The document praised humanity's strength and mercy, begging for kind treatment of the Corvathi people. The United Earth government was utterly confused by this message. They were not at war with the Corvathi. They had never threatened the Corvathi. They had barely even heard of the Corvathi before receiving the surrender document. Ambassador Vasquez tried for 3 days to explain that humanity did not accept surrenders from people they were not fighting. The Corvathi government responded with increasingly desperate pleas, offering more territory, more resources, anything to appease the Death World conquerors. Finally, a frustrated Vasquez managed to arrange a direct conversation with the Corvathi Prime Minister. She asked, as calmly as she could, why in the name of all that was holy the Corvathi thought humanity was conquering them. The Prime Minister stared at her through the communication screen. "One of your warriors walked through lethal radiation to save 3 of our people," he said. "He carried them to safety while his own body burned from the inside. Then he asked for dinner." Vasquez was silent for a moment. "That was Michael Torres. He's not a warrior. He's a high school teacher." The Prime Minister's face went pale. "A teacher? You give your children to someone who can survive lethal radiation?" "Mr. Torres said the radiation levels reminded him of a cleanup job he did in his 20s. We had a nuclear plant accident, and volunteers helped with the recovery. It's not that unusual." The Prime Minister ended the call without another word. The surrender remained on the table. The Corvathi seemed to believe that refusing it would anger their new human overlords. Back on the Grand Station, Ambassador Vasquez sat alone in her quarters, reading reports from across the galaxy. Everywhere, humans were being treated with terror. Everywhere, their attempts at friendship were being rejected. Everywhere, they were seen as monsters. She did not understand why. She was a diplomat. She had spent her career building bridges between peoples. She believed in communication, cooperation, and mutual understanding. But how could you communicate with people who ran away when you smiled? She made a decision. If the galaxy would not explain itself, she would force an explanation. She would go to the council directly, walk into their chamber, and demand to know what was happening. If they feared her, she would show them there was nothing to fear. And if they would not listen, she would make them listen. The children of Kethvul had come in peace. It was time for the galaxy to understand what that really meant. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of the Grand Station with determined steps. She had not slept well in weeks. The confusion and frustration had built up inside her until she felt like she might explode. Today, she would get answers or die trying. Not that she expected to die. She had survived too much in her life to worry about something as simple as an uncomfortable conversation. She had grown up in the favelas of Sao Paulo, where every day was a fight for survival. She had watched friends die from disease, violence, and poverty. She had clawed her way out through education, determination, and a stubborn refusal to accept that the world owed her nothing but suffering. At 32, she had been diagnosed with cancer. The doctors had given her 2 years to live. She had fought back with chemotherapy, radiation, and sheer willpower. The treatments had been agony. There were days when she wanted to die just to escape the pain. But she had kept fighting, kept enduring, kept refusing to surrender. She was 53 years old now. She had outlived her diagnosis by 20 years. She had outlived 3 husbands, 2 of natural causes, and 1 in a shuttle accident. She had raised 2 children and buried 1. She had built a career in diplomacy through talent, hard work, and an absolute unwillingness to take no for an answer. A few frightened aliens were not going to stop her from doing her job. The security checkpoints leading to the council chamber were heavily guarded. Teams of soldiers from a dozen different species stood at each one, armed with weapons that could vaporize flesh. They watched Vasquez approach with obvious terror in their various eyes. She walked straight toward the first checkpoint without slowing down. "Ambassador, you do not have authorization to proceed," said the guard captain, a massive creature with 4 arms and chitinous armor covering most of its body. Its voice trembled slightly. "Then stop me," Vasquez said calmly. The captain did not move. Neither did any of the other guards. They parted before her like water before a ship's bow, pressing themselves against the walls as she passed. She walked through checkpoint after checkpoint. At each one, the guards tried to challenge her. At each one, they backed down when she kept walking. They could have stopped her. They had the weapons and the numbers, but none of them wanted to be the one to touch the Death World predator. The doors to the council chamber were enormous, carved from some kind of crystal that glowed with inner light. 2 elite guards stood before them, the best soldiers in the galaxy, trained for centuries in combat techniques that could kill most opponents in seconds. They stepped aside without a word. Vasquez pushed the doors open and walked into the chamber. The Council of 12,000 Worlds was in session. Representatives from every member species filled the vast circular room, arranged in tiers that rose toward a distant ceiling. At the center, the 12 ruling species sat at their great table, debating matters of galactic importance. All of this stopped when Vasquez entered. 12,000 voices fell silent at once. 12,000 pairs of eyes, or more in the case of some species, turned to stare at the human who had walked uninvited into their most sacred space. Vasquez stood at the entrance for a moment, surveying the room. She saw fear in those watching eyes. Fear and something else that she had not expected. Resignation. They looked at her like prey animals watching a predator approach. They had accepted that this moment would come. They had been waiting for the children of Keth-Vuul to show their true nature, to abandon the pretense of friendship and reveal themselves as the conquering monsters they surely must be. Vasquez felt something shift inside her. The frustration that had driven her here began to transform into something else. Understanding. She walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. Representatives scrambled out of her path, climbing over seats and pushing each other aside in their desperation to get away from her. Some made sounds of distress. A few fled through emergency exits. The rest pressed themselves against the walls, trying to be invisible. By the time she reached the great table, almost a third of the chamber had emptied. The 12 ruling representatives remained, frozen in their seats, watching her with expressions that ranged from terror to despair. High Chancellor Yorith rose from his place. His massive form cast a shadow across the table. His glowing eyes met hers, and in them she saw the weight of terrible knowledge. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, his deep voice carefully controlled. "You were not expected." "I noticed," she replied. "I've been trying to get a meeting for 3 weeks. It seemed easier to just show up." A sound rippled through the remaining representatives. It might have been nervous laughter. It might have been whimpers of fear. Vasquez looked around the chamber, taking in the scene. Thousands of intelligent beings, representatives of civilizations that had existed for millions of years, cowering before a single human woman who had simply walked through their security because no one was willing to touch her. "I came here to ask why everyone is afraid of us," she said. "I think I already know the answer." She turned back to the Chancellor. "You found the old records, didn't you? The ones from the first civilization. The ones that talk about our world." Yorith's glowing eyes flickered. "How did you know about those?" "I didn't until now. But it's the only explanation that makes sense." She paused. "What did they call us? What name did they give our world?" There was a long silence. Then Archivist Kulvith rose from his seat among the ruling representatives. The ancient scholar looked exhausted. His scales faded and his 7 eyes dim with fatigue, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "They called your world Keth-Vuul. In their language, it means the death world, the crucible, the nursery of nightmares." Vasquez nodded slowly. "And what did they say about us?" "They said to run. They said to never make contact. They said that you were the most dangerous species they had ever created, the product of the most hostile environment in the galaxy." Kulvith's voice dropped. "They said to pray you never found us." The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present was watching the exchange, waiting to see what the human would do with this information. Vasquez closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something in her expression that had not been there before. It was not anger. It was not triumph. It was sadness. "Everything you fear about us is true," she said. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives made sounds of despair. Others clutched at their seats as if preparing for an attack. "Everything," Vasquez repeated. "We are persistence predators. We can walk our prey to death over distances that would kill most species from exhaustion. We bond with wolves and make them our companions. We eat poison for pleasure. We burn and poison ourselves to fight disease. We have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, plagues, and wars that killed millions of our own kind." She began walking slowly around the great table, and the ruling representatives shrank back as she passed. "Our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. It threw everything it had at us. Disease, predators, climate change, natural disasters, and we survived it all. We didn't just survive, we conquered. We tamed the wolves and the horses. We learned to grow our own food. We built cities that could withstand earthquakes and storms. We developed medicine that could cure diseases that once wiped out entire populations." She stopped walking and turned to face the chamber. "We are exactly as dangerous as you believe. We are the children of the death world. We are forged in fire and blood and constant struggle. There is nothing in this galaxy that we cannot survive, nothing we cannot overcome, nothing we cannot endure." Her voice dropped, becoming soft but somehow carrying to every corner of the vast room. "And we came here looking for friends." She saw confusion mixing with the fear in the watching eyes. This was not what they had expected. The monster was supposed to roar and threaten. It was not supposed to speak of friendship. "Do you know why we came to the stars?" Vasquez asked. "It wasn't for conquest. It wasn't for resources. It wasn't because we needed more room or more power. We came because we were lonely." She looked up at the distant ceiling, where lights glowed like artificial stars. "For our entire existence, we looked up at the night sky and wondered if anyone else was out there. We told stories about beings from other worlds. We built machines to listen for signals from distant stars. We dreamed of meeting other minds, other souls, other people who might understand us." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "We have each other. Billions of us, all different, all unique, somehow managing to live together on one small planet. But we always felt alone in the universe. We always wondered if there was anyone else who looked up at the stars and asked the same questions we asked." She lowered her gaze back to the assembled representatives. "And now we've found you. Thousands of species, thousands of civilizations, a galaxy full of life and wonder and possibility. Do you have any idea how happy that made us? Do you have any idea what it meant to us to know that we weren't alone?" Silence. "We don't want to hurt you," Vasquez said. "We never have. We didn't come here to conquer or destroy. We came here because we wanted to meet you. We wanted to learn about you. We wanted to share our stories with you and hear yours in return. We wanted—" She paused, searching for the right words. "We wanted to not be alone anymore." High Chancellor Yorith spoke into the silence. "How can we believe you? How can we trust creatures who evolved to kill, who survived by hunting and fighting and destroying? How can we know that your friendship is not simply another hunting strategy?" Vasquez turned to face him directly. "You can't. Not yet. Trust has to be earned. But I can tell you this. On our world, we learned that the best way to survive is not to fight everyone. It's to find allies, friends, family." She pointed toward the door where she had entered. "Out there, in the galaxy, you have enemies. Real enemies. Not frightened newcomers asking for friendship. You have species that would conquer you, enslave you, destroy you without a second thought. You've been fighting them for millennia. You've lost entire civilizations to them." She lowered her hand. "We could help with that." Another ripple of reaction went through the chamber. This was unexpected. The Death World predators were offering protection? "You're right that we're dangerous," Vasquez continued. "You're right that we're survivors, that we never give up, that we keep coming no matter what. But that's not a threat to you. That's a promise." She spread her hands, palms up, in a gesture of openness. "Let us be your friends. Let us stand with you against the darkness. Let us use the strength of our Death World heritage to protect the galaxy instead of threatening it. We have spent our whole existence fighting for survival. Give us something worth fighting for, and we will fight for it, until the stars go out." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Archivist Kolveth stepped forward, moving slowly toward Vasquez on ancient legs. "I have spent my life studying history," he said. "I have read the records of 1,000,000 species, 1 billion years of galactic civilization. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched entire species vanish from existence." He stopped directly in front of Vasquez, looking up at her with his 7 tired eyes. "In all those records, I have never seen a species like yours. You should not exist. Your world should have killed you 100 times over, and yet here you are, standing before the greatest powers in the galaxy, offering friendship." He extended one of his thin manipulator limbs. "I believe," he said softly, "that this is what your people call friendship." Vasquez looked at the offered limb. She thought about all the fear she had encountered since coming to the Grand Station, all the rejected invitations, all the unanswered messages, all the beings who ran away when she smiled. She thought about her life on Earth, the favelas where she had grown up surrounded by poverty and violence, the cancer that had tried to kill her, the pain of chemotherapy and radiation, the husbands she had buried, the child she had lost. She thought about the stars, and the dream that had driven humanity upward through all that suffering, the dream of finding others in the vast darkness of space. She reached out and took Kolveth's limb in her hand. "Yeah," she said. "It is." The sound that rippled through the chamber this time was different. It was not fear. It was something like hope. One by one, other representatives began to move forward. They were still afraid. They were still uncertain. But they were curious now, too. The monster had been given a chance to attack, and instead it had offered its hand. High Chancellor Yorith stepped down from his place at the great table. His massive form moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid of making sudden movements. He stopped a few paces from Vasquez and lowered his head in a gesture of respect. "Ambassador," he said, "the Council has made mistakes. We judged you by your origins, not your intentions. We feared what you were, not what you could become." He raised his head. "I cannot speak for all of us. The fear will not disappear overnight. There will be those who never accept you, who will always see you as a threat. But I am willing to try. I am willing to believe that the children of Kethvul can be something more than monsters." Vasquez smiled. It was a genuine smile, not the diplomatic mask she usually wore. She felt the tension of weeks draining away, replaced by something warm and hopeful. "That's all we've ever asked," she said. "A chance. Let us show you who we really are." The doors to the chamber opened, and other members of the human delegation entered. They had been waiting outside, ready to support their ambassador if needed. Now they came to stand beside her, facing the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. They were not soldiers. They were not warriors. They were diplomats, scientists, teachers, and traders, ordinary humans who had volunteered to represent their species among the stars. They were also the children of a death world, forged in fire, tempered by struggle, carrying the heritage of 1,000,000 years of survival in their bones, and they were smiling. Vasquez addressed the chamber one final time. "The galaxy is a dangerous place. You know that better than we do. But you don't have to face it alone anymore. We're here now. We're not going anywhere. And if you let us, we will stand between you and the darkness." She paused, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. "That's what friends do." The negotiations would take years. The treaties would be complex. The process of building trust between humanity and the galactic community would be long and difficult, filled with misunderstandings and setbacks. But in that moment, in the council chamber of the Grand Station, something changed. The galaxy looked at humanity and saw monsters. Humanity looked back and saw friends. And against all probability, against all the warnings of ancient civilizations and all the fears of modern ones, those two visions began to merge into something new. The children of Kethvul had come home to a family they had never known existed, and the galaxy, for the first time in its long history, had protectors who would never stop fighting, never give up, never surrender. The darkness was still out there, vast and hungry and waiting. But now, so were the humans, and the humans were no longer alone.